Hi guys, so I'm going to try this again. I've tried a couple times, but my kids are screaming in the background. So as you can tell, I've started a couple times, and since I'm out, I'm not able to print new copies of this. So we're just going to look at the same copy again. What we're doing today is proving that triangles are congruent, which is what we've been doing all week. We just haven't written it out in the two columns. Okay, but what you're going to do is just look at the diagram you're given, as we have been doing. If we're given this diagram, and we're going to mark it up with what we know, what we're given, and then also what we know based on vertical angles or anything else. Same thing we've been doing. We're given that this triangle, QSR, and this triangle, TSR, are right triangles. Therefore, we know these are right angles. We're also given that QS is congruent to TS. QS congruent to TS. So we can mark that. And then we all know that because it shares this line SR, we can say SR congruent to itself by reflexive property. Okay, so we can say then that if we have a right triangle and the hypotenuses are congruent and one of the legs is congruent, we know the triangles are congruent by hypotenuse leg. If the hypotenuses are congruent and the leg is congruent, that's enough for us to say the triangles are congruent, which is what we're trying to prove. Triangles congruent. Okay, so we've done the whole problem now. All we need to do is write it out. So if we were given that the triangles are right angles, that was given. We are given QS congruent to TS, that was given. We know SR congruent to SR, that's reflexive property. And with that information, we can say the triangle QSR is congruent to triangle TSR because of hypotenuse leg. That's all we need to do for the proof. So it's basically what you've been doing, just written out in the two columns. Okay, you break down the diagram you're given with the information you're given and anything else you know, and then look at it and see what information you have and if it's enough to prove based on the theorems that the triangles are congruent. Okay, let's go through. Let's take a look at this one. Here's our diagram. We're trying to prove that WXZ, this triangle on the bottom left there, is congruent to WXZ, this triangle over here. No, YXZ, this triangle. We're given XW congruent to XY. We're also given that XZ, this line here, bisects WXY. This line bisects the big one, which makes this side congruent to this side. Remember, in a bisector, we look at the big angle and it cuts them in half. We also know by reflexive property that, remember, anytime you just have a line that they share, mark it as reflexive. Okay, so that's what we've been doing. We've been marking what was given. We've been marking what we know by reflexive, and then looking at what we have in both triangles. In both triangles, we have a pair of congruent sides. We have a pair of congruent angles. And we have another pair of congruent sides. A side, angle, side. So by side, angle, side, I can say the triangles are congruent. Okay, so all we need to do now is write that out. We were given XW equals XY. That was given. We were given XZ bisects WXY. That information was given. We know that because we know XZ is a bisector of the big one, that this angle WXZ is congruent to YXZ. Because definition of angle bisector. We know we mark ZX congruent to ZX. Reflexive. And then we decided that since we have a side, an angle, and a side, that was enough to say that triangle WXZ congruent to triangle YXZ. We know the triangles are congruent because of side, angle, side. Okay, so you're breaking down your diagram and then writing out the steps that help you prove it. Let's do SR bisects QST. SR bisects QST. So we have this side congruent to this side. We are also given angle SQR, this angle, congruent to STR, this angle. Those are given. The two pairs of angles. Then we know by reflexive that this side is congruent to itself. So what we have here is an angle, and a side. We're trying to prove the triangles are congruent, and we know that having an angle, and a side is enough to prove they're congruent. So we're ready to write out our proof. First, we're going to start with our given. SR bisects QST. That was given. And angle SQR, I'm just going to call it angle Q, congruent to angle T. That was given. We know that since SR is a bisector, right? SR is a bisector, so we marked this side congruent to this side. So RSQ congruent to angle RST. Because the definition of bisector says that it cuts it into two congruent parts. Alright. We know SR is congruent to itself by reflexive. And then we had decided because of angle, side, that was enough for me to say that triangle QSR congruent to TSR. Angle, side. Okay, once again, you take your diagram and break it down just like we've been practicing for the last week and a half. Mark what you're given, mark anything else that you know to be true, and then think about if that, what you know, what you've marked, is enough to prove that the triangles are congruent by one of the theorems that we learned. Okay. I want to do one of these with you as well. This CTC. So I've had posted a video about CTC. What that means is that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so on this problem, we are being asked to prove that RQS, this angle, I'm going to make it green, that means we don't know yet, is congruent to RTS. This angle congruent to that. Okay, I'm going to leave those green and work in a different color because that's not given information, that's what we're trying to show. What we are given is that QS, this line, is congruent to TS. And we're given R as the midpoint. R is the midpoint of QT. So it doesn't look like it, but we're given that information, so let's say it. R is the midpoint of this whole thing. We know if it's a midpoint that it cuts it into two congruent sides. So that means this side is congruent to this side. We also know, as in all our pictures, that if as a side it shares, we can say by reflexive property that those are congruent. Therefore, we have this triangle, these two triangles, this side congruent, this side congruent, this side congruent. By side, we know that's one of our properties. We can say that these two triangles are congruent. And what we know about congruent triangles is that every side and every angle of those triangles is congruent. The corresponding parts are congruent. So if I have congruent triangles, then I know that this corresponding parts, angle Q and angle T, have to be congruent because the whole entire triangle is congruent. That is what corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's what that means. Okay, so therefore I prove these are congruent because I proved the triangles are congruent. So let's write them out. QS congruent to TS given. R is midpoint given. And then we knew, because R is a midpoint, we knew that this side, QR, congruent to RT, because that's the definition of midpoint. I knew SR congruent to SR because that's reflexive. Alright, so then since everything we have here, we have a side, another side, and another side that are congruent to each other. Side, side, and side congruent to each other. So we can say that triangle QRS is congruent to triangle TRS because of side, side, side. And once we know the triangles are congruent, we can say any of their parts are congruent. So I can say this angle that we were looking for, angle RQS, is congruent to RTS, that other angle we were looking for, because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. CP, CTC. Okay, do the best you can on these. We're going to go over them again when I get back. There is a worksheet for you to do where some of the statements are given and some of the reasons are given. You just need to fill in the blank. And then there's also a PowerPoint that I want you to open and look at. It looks like this, and it has all your statements and all your reasons provided for you. So all you need to do is like pull your statements over and put them, actually I think they're sitting right here. Just put them in the right order and then move your reasons around to match up with your statements to finish that. So there's 4 of them on there, and then the worksheet. Do the best you can. Let me know where your questions are. I'm looking forward to getting back with you guys so we can go over all these together. Thanks.